I'm Adam Brown, an innovation expert with Ipsos. Together with MarketLogic and AlchemyRx, we're launching a new executive content series confronting the decline of innovation and hopefully inspiring leaders to bring it back as a meaningful growth driver. Innovation has never been more essential, with today's environment marked by volatility, pressure, and rapid change. While innovation has historically been a growth engine, its contribution to top-line revenue growth is in decline. That's why we've partnered to launch this series, to spotlight the real challenges leaders face and offer strategic, insight-led approaches to reignite innovation across their organizations. So to start this conversation, we're joined by guest Gonzalve Bich, CEO of Bich. Gonzalve has spent over 20 years at Bich, leading the company through a modern transformation while staying rooted in its iconic and essential products that deliver everyday joy and simplicity. Thanks so much for joining us today, Gonzalve.
Thanks so much for having me, and I'm glad to be the guinea pig.
Yeah. Also here with us today is Tiffany Stork, our partner at AlchemyRx. Tiffany has experience innovating as an in-house CPG brand leader and now as a strategic consultant. She'll be leading us through a series of questions for Gonzalve. Tiffany, over to you.
Thanks, Adam, and thank you, Gonzalve. We're thrilled to have you here with us today as we kick off this series. To get us started, could you share a little bit about your background, especially how innovation has played a role in your leadership journey and at Bich?
Well, innovation's really been at the heart of the company since the beginning, way before me. But I have fond memories as a kid of my dad bringing home the new writing instruments that he was coming up with. One of my particular favorites was a round stick or a crystal that was twisted, and the ABS really was beautiful. We also had an edible round stick back then. Today, totally inappropriate. We could never pull that off. But it's been at the heart of what I've done at Bich for more than 20 years and the company. So I joined in a sales and marketing role, and that was bringing innovation to new parts of the world. So I started my career in Singapore and Tokyo, and then kind of meandered into different roles in developing markets, Western Europe, and then the US, and finally becoming CEO a few years ago. But what's always been core to our organization is the focus on the consumer and making sure that we're serving the needs that they know and the needs that they don't know, plus as many of the wants as we can possibly get into the product while maintaining the simplicity and use of what we try and bring to bear 30 million times a day or 35 million times a day. And that's really the secret sauce, if you will. When I think holistically about the organization and its evolution through innovation, it really came at the nascent, right? So my grandfather started with the ball pen, and then that took off. And for 20 years, it was innovating what you could see and couldn't see. So yes, we would change the color or the design of the product, but fundamentally the innovation was making it more and more and more reliable. Today, a crystal pen will write over 3,000 meters of writing. Now, when we kicked off, it wasn't quite that number. Some of us will remember the hole in the ballpoint pen cap. That was an innovation for safety of children who were at that time swallowing pen caps, and so there was a risk. So we created that innovation. The little hole that's in the side of the barrel, for example, to pressurize the product when you go up and down in airplanes or you change elevation where you live so that it doesn't leak. But innovation isn't only in the product, and that's really what I'm thrilled that is so embedded in the culture of this organization, because it's one of the things that makes it so resilient over 8 decades of work. Is we also innovate commercially in how we bring the products to market for the consumer. We innovate in marketing, so we were very early into digital marketing. We're very early into all the new areas of marketing around the world. And then also just how we operate as an organization. We can go into that, but it's really about empowering our people, every single team member, to be curious and to be determined. Because innovation is and you said it in your intro, it can bring growth. It is bringing a little bit less growth, maybe than some companies might like in current circumstances. But fundamentally, it is the resilience of the organization, because the minute you stand still and you stop innovating, you start dying or going backwards. And that's really the difficulty I think a lot of organizations have gone through these last 5 to 10 years. But I believe we're going to see some big leaps in the next 5 to 10. So I'm really excited by what BIC will do and what other organizations will do in CPG.
Awesome, thank you. We have so many different threads that and what you just said that we're going to touch on today. So thank you for that setup. Innovation, as we talked about, has such clear potential to drive growth, and a lot of companies do underestimate its strategic role in growth. Not as many as you'd think actually set targets for how much growth should come from innovation or track it as a total percentage of sales. Just from your perspective, why do you think innovation is often underestimated as a growth lever, and what might help leaders shift their mindset?
Well, innovation is easy to celebrate, right? So those big wins, everybody can get behind them. Nobody doesn't like a good launch party, those types of things. One, people neglect to remember that the innovation of today probably started 12, 18, 24, 36, maybe more months ago. In some cases, in some parts of our business, for example, when we create a new blade edge, that's a 10-year project of innovation. So first you have to set the vision for what 10 years from now is going to look like from a performance perspective or a consumer requirement, and then innovate towards that. And that can be very difficult for some organizations to live through because it requires patience, commitment, determination, grit, which is the word I really like. You have to see things through and understand that designs 1 through 99 may fail. Hopefully 100 is the right one, but you may have to go 200, 300. In that case, with the pressure of quarterly earnings or your competitive set, it's easy for leadership to give up, lose faith, go for the easy, change the color, modify the design a little bit, slap a logo here or there, and put it back into the market. And I think that's why you see a lot of failure in the last decade. And something that we've been very, very focused on is making sure that we have short, mid, and long-term plans. And those are built into incentive systems. They're built into how we talk about the organization, where the CEO spends his time, senior management gets engaged or not engaged. That's really how you get your organization really focused about it. Because otherwise, it's really hard to stay the course on these long-term projects. And when I think about some of the products that we've brought to bear or to market in the last 2 or 3 years, 1 or 2 of them were done in less than a year. They were reactive to a situation or an opportunity that we saw. And that's when you need to see, can my organization sprint? How fast can we really, really go? And I think consumer product companies in the last 5 years have demonstrated that skill really, really well, whether it was during COVID, the supply chain challenges of the following couple of years, or even in the last couple of years. Where organizations find it sometimes harder is those longer term initiatives. First of all, they have to carry across, in some cases, different leaderships. Your top team changes. Mm-hmm. This is the world that we live in now today. Teams change. At BIC right now, we're operating our own change, so my successor. And it's really important to be able to show continuity to your investors, to your customers, to consumers, but also to your teams, to make sure that we understand that we're going to make true on those convictions and beliefs. Now, at the end of the day, part of leadership's challenge, and then that's really, I guess, the secret sauce, is also knowing when to stop a project. Because we've all seen those never-ending innovation projects that in the end, unfortunately, there is no solve for, either because the technology doesn't exist yet, or fundamentally, and it's something that maybe we'll talk about a little bit later, the consumer doesn't need nor want it. Sounds like a great idea in the fishbowl in the R&D department, but if nobody wants to buy it, think of the pen that would write underwater or in zero gravity. The potential for sales is probably quite limited, and you want me focused a lot more on something that's going to write 3,500 meters for school children around the world, better value for money. So those are some of the things that I think are really influencing the trends right now.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's go back to one of the points you made in that answer, which is about being able to invest in innovation in this tension between long-term investment and short-term, because as you mentioned, people love innovation. I think it can be exciting, people want to do it, but when resources get tight specifically, companies kind of have that reaction to say, oh, we can't afford to invest in innovation right now, or we need to deprioritize it to do these short-term things, where sometimes that can be, can feel good in the moment, but in the long run, it kind of creates this long-term cycle of not being able to fund innovation and then not having the money from innovation to fund. And you bring such a unique perspective, having led Bich as a public company that's accountable for short-term results, but as a family business where you are focused on long-term value. Do you have some practical advice to give, having funded innovation at Bich and having had the success of being able to navigate the tension from leadership between cost cutting during rough times or investing in innovation for long-term growth?
Well, I didn't answer part of your previous question, which is how do you set targets? And I'm sorry. So I'll rectify that and I'll blend into the second part. When we set out to transform the organization 6-7 years ago, we knew that we had to reconnect with meaningful mid and long-term innovation. Easy to do the short-term stuff. I mean, not easy to do the short-term stuff, but that's generally kind of the basics that most organizations can do. And to your point, when the cost cutting starts, it goes down to that point. Nobody really turns that stuff off. So what we said is we want to get to 10% of our net sales per annum growth coming from innovation. And you tie incentives to that, but more importantly, you tie management's time to that. So it's as simple as saying like, okay, how often am I going to the R&D department? How often am I getting samples? It's my dad loved this stuff. He used to walk around with this crazy briefcase for 30 years. The thing was on its last leg at the end. And in it, as a kid, I always remember these Ziploc bags of samples, a never-ending slew of samples. He was obsessed with many small changes that he wanted to make. And I took that from him. I always want to make sure that I understand where the current product set is, what we're working on. And if I use it and I don't like it and I give it to my kids and they don't really like it, yes, we're going to put it into testing and go ask 10,000 consumers because we're not representative necessarily of every consumer on the planet. But you need to make sure that it kind of lights up people's eyes. Now, that's not a great metric. It doesn't fit on anybody's scorecard. So you'll want to pull me back down to kind of, okay, how do you run these big organizational R&D? Again, it has to do with having a shared vision for the future of the consumer. So what is shaving going to look like in a decade? Who's going to be shaving? Why are they going to be shaving? What part of their bodies are they going to be shaving? What in our set today is perfectly adapted to those needs? Where are there misses? What do we need to add? What needs to be tweaked? Does the technology exist? I think in the last years, part of what AI has unlocked for us is that ability to really understand, okay, you have these massive data sets. Can you synthesize it down to 1 or 2 ideas? And then you can turn to the engineers and go, hey guys, can we do this? Like, mechanically, can we do it? And can we not do it maybe 3, because this is a reality in our business. Making me 5 prototypes, I'm sure they can do anything I want. But can you make 10 million of them a day at 1 micron tolerance, under 1% scrap rate, and making sure that every single unit coming off the line is worthy of having the Bich logo on it for consumers around the world? Those are the standards and bars that you want to be setting. And over the last 10 years, I would say in consumer, one of the things that I've seen slip, not here at Bich, is again, it's that family focus on things, but was that attention to quality. And so you had this mindset kind of ported over from pure tech where you had minimum viable product. Let's just get something out and see what happens. Well, consumers don't always particularly well react to being, you take their hard-earned money for something that's almost ready. I don't believe in that. And then one of the advice I would give to people who are signing off on those final launch plans is it really, really ready and worthy of the consumer and your brand and your reputation and your heritage? Because if it's not, better to delay by 3 months or 6 months and maybe disappoint some of your stakeholders than to disappoint all of your customers and all of your consumers. Because building reputations takes decades, and as we know, losing them is in minutes in today's world.
Fantastic advice. 100% that. I love that one of the other things you brought up just now is AI and still being grounded in the consumer insight, because so many people, I think, see AI as like the shiny future, right? And unless that's grounded in a consumer insight where you're solving something for the consumer, either that they do know or don't know, but it's still based in their needs, it can just be innovation for innovation's sake, which is not going to be viable in the market. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about consumer insights, where innovation rooted in insight has such higher potential. Having the right consumer and market insights to guide strong decisions and development and make sure that the product is ready. Many companies understand the idea of being consumer centric and they aim to do that. But many can fall short or struggle to really connect those dots between insights and innovation. Can you share more about how BIC uses consumer understanding and data-driven insights in its innovation process, and potentially give an example of a launch that was successful because of it?
Sure. To answer your question, I think you need to go one even click back, is how much data do you have and where is it coming from? I remember many years ago, early on in my career, hearing from a perspective of fill in country or office or team. Like, well, that's really interesting, but every person on the planet is our consumer, in my case. How do you represent them? How are you representing a 14-year-old Japanese schoolgirl writing exams in tiny little characters in a blue book where it's 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter square, and you're on wide rule in Nebraska? Maybe let's not. So the first thing that our organization focuses on is the breadth and depth of the data, and we invest quite a lot in getting it and making sure that it's agnostic as possible. So we use outside agencies. We really triple test the data. Now, AI is really good at taking insane numbers of data points and synthesizing them for you, but kind of like asking ChatGPT a quick offhanded comment, you want to make sure that you check its answer and you cross-reference, so that you really do need those data science teams. And again, those are long-term investments that I think organizations would do well to maintain and augment for those who haven't really built them out. So you do that, but let's say you take 100 million data points and you bring them down to 10. That's not an insight yet. Now, this is where the real magic happens, is taking that and turning into insight. Let's say 100. And 90 of them are probably going to be dead wrong once you start testing them against the real world. Okay, so now we're down to 10 usable insights. Okay, how many of those, back to what I was saying, do we have the technology to fulfill? Actually, only 8. Great, so we've gone from the top, that huge number, down to 8 projects. And you spread those out over time. You say, okay, 3 of those we can do this year, 2 of those we can slot them into next year because that's about how long it's going to take. And 1 or 2 of them, undetermined how long it's going to take. And back to that time quotient and that ability to say, I believe, I have the grit, I have the resilience, I have the determination, and I have a vision to achieve. So I'm not giving up until we've solved problem X, Y, Z. To your question about innovation and flowing it into a product, well, having made this product, the J6 lighter, for 30, 40 years now, hundreds and hundreds of millions of them, we knew that consumers were burning their fingers in certain angles, in certain ways, right? Not burning, burning's the wrong word, but they were getting hot. And so we needed to find a better way to get around that. We have a long barbecue lighter, but that's a little bit too much to light let's say, just a candle on the table. So we created Easy Reach, which has that short wand on it. And that came out of consumer insights. And then we found Snoop and Martha as our spokespeople, and that's really marketing insights. And when we put those two things together, it's been quite the blockbusters the last few years.
Wonderful. I love that. It's such a good example of an innovation that meets an actual consumer need and with the marketing insight to get people excited about it. That's amazing. When we look at companies' innovation funnels, we like to look at the balance between renovation and innovation. Renovation being products that are slightly better or a different version. This would fit the kind of color changes that you talked about earlier in the conversation, versus innovations that offer an incremental benefit, something that's truly different and offers the consumer more value. There's been a big shift in CPG on heavier in renovations and kind of less of those breakthrough innovations or offering new consumer benefits. How do you guys handle at BIC kind of approaching the right balance of incremental improvements versus more transformative ideas? And what advice could you provide executives on shaping a culture of innovation that encourages both?
So again, I'm going to repeat myself. It's really about having that long-term. On the pure innovation side, you just have to believe and be fairly dogmatic about it, saying, I'm setting aside this much resource financially, this much resource in human capital, this much resource in manufacturing expertise, all those things. And you kind of got to set them into stone. Now, of course, when massive swings, a COVID event happens, yes, maybe you take a slight pause for a few months, because frankly, how many people are in the innovation lab during a COVID type event? But those are black swan events. We can't plan for those. Those are more the, on the renovation, again, my counsel though, is to make sure that each of those renovations is meaningful to the consumer. And I flippantly said color change. Well, in some cases, you do want to do a color change because the consumer set, fashion has told us that we need to move from coral to salmon. Okay, great. We'll move from coral to salmon because there's a real need to. But if it's just, well, we've had coral on the shelf and it's not doing so well anymore, let's try salmon, that's a losing proposition. That's where you go back to your consumer research, understand why is it not working. And I think it's a trap that people can fall into when a product or launch isn't as successful as the PowerPoint said it was going to be. Well, let's do renovation to it. No, here's where I would challenge us all to go back to those first principles insight, understand where we went wrong, and really innovate from that, versus just trying to put another coat of paint on something that's not quite working. So the way I think about it with organizations, though, is not to have one team doing A, one team doing B, one team doing C, because otherwise it kind of becomes like your varsity, junior varsity, and then that third string team. That's never a winning proposition from an engagement perspective. But when you engage your entire organization to think, hey, what does everybody feel? How are we feeling about this product? What could we do better when we have more than 10,000 team members around the world? And when we asked them, we created this internal project called BIC Up. And in 2024, last year, there were 24,000 suggestions into the system, which is totally unmanageable, wow, by the way, without AI. But because we have AI, is totally manageable. And then we synthesized that down to about a third of the ideas got executed. Some of them are as tiny as, hey, could we make the pen cap a little bit more blue, a little bit less blue? But others are, the packaging design fundamentally doesn't meet the expectation of mom or dad who's bought the product and wants to keep it in the drawer for little Jimmy for in 3 months, and they're giving little Jimmy, one pen every so often. Those are the fundamental questions that you need to ask yourself. And you can go up and up and up the supply chain. But if you think that renovation is just changing colors or packaging, you're missing a trick. I think renovation needs to be more impactful. And you need to set that expectation for renovation being more impactful. And yes, if we have to do a color change, we'll do a color change. But that's really not, it's not even something that I'm not going to say we don't track, but you don't get points in innovation for doing that type of stuff. So in our 10%, that wouldn't count.
Yep. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. So with that, is there anything more you want to say on the culture of innovation? Just being able to activate at every level this idea that ideas can come from anywhere, but then there's still kind of this gut check on is it right for the consumer? Are we offering the right thing for the consumer?
Yeah, and I would push that question further. Is it right for us? Is it right for our brand? When you have an offering as wide as we do, you come out, the engine brings us ideas that aren't right for our brand. They're not right for our heritage. There may be a consumer need. I just may choose not to go down that path, either because it's unprofitable or it does something to the consumer that we don't feel comfortable with. But those are choices organizations make in two ways. One, leadership, but more importantly, and I hope this is the case in other organizations, through culture. And when you have a strong value set and a strong, this is what we bring to everyone on the planet, or in our case, but if you're, hey, this is my core consumer, and you have a very clear moral contract, if you will, with that consumer set saying, this is what I represent, and this is what you should trust, that every single time you open one of our packages, you are going to get from us, no matter the product, no matter the format or what. That's really, really important. And that's a cultural element that needs to be pervasive across your entire organization, because you'll have lots of issues if that's true in innovation, but in the manufacturing environment, they're like, no, focus on just cranking out anything. We need units to come out the door. Sooner or later, those things are going to clash. Another particular clash is innovation versus your finance department. How much should XYZ cost? I was reading something the other day that said, wouldn't it have been wonderful if the CFO of Nokia 20 years ago hadn't focused on the cost of the screen being sub $2 on a phone? What would have happened to Nokia? Now, I don't know. I didn't work there and I'm not part of it, but it really triggered in me the thought, okay, what are my sacred truths that I'm holding that could be like that and that I need to let go of because they're holding the organization back? And so where that takes us, though, is innovation isn't the job of R&D, or innovation if you've renamed your department, or even consumer whatever. It's really the job of every single person in your organization. And if you have evangelists and fans like we have for our products, you better be listening to that. I think we've all heard the story of Lego's turnaround, how they went from trying to sell Legos to everyone to really focusing on their fan base and understanding how that drove new collections, new little pieces and everything. And that's a lesson we all should be taking to heart. Okay, who are my super fans or my super users, and what can they tell me that I may be hiding from myself, or I don't want to hear because it's uncomfortable, because it's going to require a significant change in my organization. But again, if you're not focused on the consumer, well, then your lifespan is limited. I just don't know how long. But as long as you're providing that value to the consumer and you're really focused on what it is that they need and they want, and when they have parted with their hard-earned money to buy your product or service and they feel good and they feel sustained in its value, you'll have resilience over time. And I don't know where BIC will go in 10, 20, 30. I mean, we've been around over 80 years, so let's project another 80 years out. What will this organization be doing? I don't know. But I know that it will stay true to its roots. It'll stay true to its focus on the consumer. And that brand, my last name, will always mean something to the consumer that is strong and that I should be proud of, whether I'm in the building or not in the building.
Wonderful. It's so great to hear your passion for the business. And as you transition out of your role, it's kind of a natural moment to reflect. What do you hope your legacy at Bic will be, especially when it comes to innovation and long-term value creation?
Well, if the trend is our friend, we've reconnected with innovation. We've really brought it back to the heart of what the organization does, how it thinks, how it's focused, who it's focused on. So we really shifted from a manufacturing organization back to the consumer business that it was at the beginning. And I'm really happy with that, because I think we found an appropriate balance for the era that we're living in. I don't know what will be in a decade. I'm most proud and I most want the organization to hold on to that curiosity, to that grit, to that desire to accomplish things that may not be perfect first time out, and accepting that failure is sometimes an expensive learning opportunity, but it is the learning opportunity. The real loss of value or destruction of value is if you don't learn anything and you just try the same thing the following year or 2 years later. And when I look at the young engineers and the designers and the marketers that we have all around the world working on the brand and the products, I'm really confident in the future of how we're engaging with both our customers and our consumers, and really what the brand means to people in each of the businesses. Today, we're still in our legacy writing business, but we created a digital writing business. We added the tattoo business. In lighter, we went way beyond just the historical product, and we've created a number of new products that we'll bed in. I mean, Easy Reach did really, really well very quickly, but we shouldn't expect, that's not the benchmark for each of our innovations, right? Maybe we won't have a Snoop and Martha at every product launch. So you have to be smart about these things. And in Shave, where we've created the Bic Blade Tech business that powers new and nascent brands with amazing shave technology, I'm really excited where that's going to go. And finally, we acquired Tangle Teezer at the end of last year, right? The premium detangling hairbrush company. Well, there's tons of it. I mean, when we did the due diligence, I was shocked at how much IP and innovation there was in that product. And when I look at that roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years, I'm super excited by what it means for the Tangle Teezer brand, but more broadly, what it means for Bic, and re-injecting the excitement of a dynamic, growing category that pulls the entire organization forward.
Wonderful. As a last question, I'd like to wrap up with a final reflection, because this series is all about helping leaders reflect and inspire them to put innovation back on their agenda. Are there any lessons learned or advice that we haven't covered yet today that you'd offer CEOs or executive teams on how to reignite innovation within their own organizations?
Well, given that it's the lifeblood of your business, right? So if you're not innovation, you're slowly going backwards or worse. After people, which is absolutely the first priority, this is the second one. So these are the meetings you don't cancel. This is the brainstorming session you don't find an excuse not to go to. You don't delegate it. And sometimes I'm a bit surprised not seeing the most senior executives of organizations really focused on the consumer and the customer, depending on who the ultimate buyer and user of your product or services. But let's talk about consumer. I'm sometimes surprised at how little time executives, because of the pull from many, many other things in their day, aren't spending enough time really understanding the why of their future innovation, their lifeblood, and really becoming as passionate about it as one might be. If you're not an evangelist for your own product, and I really don't know who should be, and if you can't get excited by something, well, that's probably feedback that you need to be giving your teams. At least for me, I can tell you that no matter how bad the day, this is the thing that makes every day bright. So if you need kind of that ray of sunshine or that hit of vitamin C, go get it with your innovation teams. And to the question earlier, set some goals for yourself. Maybe set one that you tell everybody else, and set one just for yourself on the underside of the sticky note, if you will. But be ambitious, go after it. And we set 10%, and last year we didn't get to 10%. And as disappointed as I was still extremely satisfied with the result. And I know it's just going to push us this year and next year to get past that 10%. So once you take that long-term view and you really focus on solving pain points, bringing products or services that meet real needs and desires and are true to the brand ethos that you've built for your organization and your brand, I think everyone works out quite well.
Well, Gonzalve, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your perspective with us. That's all the questions we have time for today. Adam, do you want to share what's next?
Absolutely. So to our viewers, we hope this conversation gave you new ways to reflect on innovation in your own organization, and a reminder that reigniting innovation starts at the top. This webinar is just the beginning. Innovation Reignited continues through January. We're going to have articles, executive interviews, and a new CEO survey to gain fresh insights into the recent decline and outlook for innovation. So keep an eye on your inbox for access to the recording and for future content. We look forward to sharing more with you soon. Gonzalve, thank you so much for your time. And Tiffany, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you both. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.